So moving right along, we have Yanta Santang Padang Abhisam Etcha. The first thing we have to do is figure out what Yanta Santang is. When I first looked at this, I thought it was possibly a compound of Yanta and Santang. Yanta is the Pali version of the Sanskrit yantra, and you might be familiar with yantra. It actually means like a machine of some kind or an instrument. It's also like a magical charm, like a geometric design. I'll put a few up here that you might have seen before. However, that is not what this is. It doesn't actually make any sense if we try to pursue that as an option. What the commentary clarifies, and I've seen this actually printed as follows, is that this is actually yan tang santang, which means that this is a relative pronoun, a demonstrative pronoun, and then the word santang. We're going to come back and look at how this works in a second. Let's actually jump to the end of this line, abhisam etcha. Now this is actually the absolutive form of abhisameti, and that has the meanings of to come by, to attain, to realize, to understand, grasp. And that means that this is probably a transitive verb, and we can look for an object in the accusative case. And we have a pretty good candidate here in padang. Padang, of course, shows up in Dhammapada. It can mean foot, path. It can mean poetic foot. It can even mean word. We're going to take it here as meaning path, and maybe not so much a literal path as a spiritual path. Now, we also have this word santang, which is an adjective, meaning calmed or peaceful. So we can put these two together as something like the peaceful path, the tranquil path. And putting that together with our absolutive, having grasped or realized or attained the tranquil path. Now, there's actually another slightly different way we can understand this. Santang could also be a neuter noun, meaning peace, or really standing in for nibbanang, nirvana. So, in this case, we could understand this as having realized or grasped the path which, and then we have to supply this word, leads to santang, which leads to peace, which leads to nirvana. And you'll find a slight echo of that in the word or the compound amatapadang, the path to the deathless, again meaning nirvana. But now we need to kind of sort out this yanta, this yantang. I'm going to present the way I originally dealt with it, my understanding, which I think is possibly still valid. And then I'll explain one of the ways the commentary takes it. And then, dear listener, not only can you adjudicate, you can please let me know if you think that there is another better way. So the way I was taking this was having realized, or abhisammecha, tung padang, that path. So I was taking the demonstrative pronoun to go with padang, tung padang, yang, and I should have said, if this were just by itself running around in the wild, we would expect young when young is followed by, but when young is followed by a word starting with a T, it changes into yan. Young santang. Tung padang young santang. That path which is peaceful. So that is how I took this. I don't know. It seems a little strange, but again, this is poetry, and you have to make allowances for poetic license arising from the exigencies of the meter. Now, in the commentary, there is a different way of taking this, and it actually addresses an issue I brought up at the very beginning in the former episode. If we look back at Karaniyang, we said that it doesn't have any sort of expressed subject that we might expect an atang or something like that. This should be done. It's possible that this yang is actually the subject of Karaniyang. So we could understand this as abhisamecha tung santung padang, kind of putting this in the English order, having realized or grasped that peaceful or tranquil path, which yang should be done, karaniyang, by one skilled at knowing what is good, atta kusalena. Now, the only issue with this is that the yang, or I should say the antecedent of yang, is not really tongue in this case, not precisely, or at least not grammatically, because it's not the peaceful path which should be done, because we don't really do a path unless we're sort of understanding, walking the path, etc. I think we'd have to understand yang as referring, its antecedent would be tung santang padang abhisamecha. In other words, grasping that tranquil path, which should be done by someone skilled at knowing what is good or profitable. I suppose, in a way, abhisamecha could be the antecedent of yang in that case. So again, dear listener, I leave it to you to adjudicate. You may come up with your own way of tackling this. I think if you read 4 or 5 translations of the Metta Sutta, you will find 4 or 5 different ways that this has been taken. The meaning doesn't vary by vast amounts, but it is it's just an issue that we kind of have to sort out when we're looking at the Pali and trying to figure out exactly how it's fitting together. And certainly sometimes in language, and maybe especially in poetry, there is ambiguity, which can be a beautiful thing.